世间所有的相遇，都是久别重逢。
清风明月如怀抱。
Life is short, eh? It's already Tuesday, right? Early morning, I would say, right? So far, we done substantial research, right? And we build products, right? And we proposed to expand it in the form of the bar, right? A business bar, like show and tell, show and sell kind of storefront for this robotics that I built, right? Now, yeah, we have put together a framework. Right? We know what we're doing, the purpose, and kind of we repeatedly debate whether it's worth it or not. Right? That's the why part, right? The purpose is it's very compassionate, I would say that, right? And it's important. Right? It's worthy the effort. Right? Now we come down to the how. I'm playing a English word, sort of language, linguistic game, if you know what a game theory is about, right? How is more human, right? Like life science, what humans are, right? But to the point that we need to think deeply or rethink again. Like we might expand what we call humans are. Right? Two directions, right? Bilaterally. There are social sort of human beings, right? We have our independence, we have our intelligence, we have our free will and consciousness, and have family, friends, children, and we have our where we work, where we study, and we do shopping, right? Have a coffee somewhere, right? We belong to some sort of a community, a particular cultural group, one of the countries, the nations, the regions, right? It's a lot of belongings, right? It's a social being, right? It's social human being, I would say that. Right? On the other hand, the emergence of sovereign robotic beings, right? It is the physical AI turning from the chatbot into actionable, like physical AI touching the real world. We needed a word model, not large language model, multimodal. Yeah, it's all fusion, right? Coming together. So, like I have demonstrated to you, like you could put a let me try to see if I can find it, right? Let's see. Right? We also look at the history, right? Yeah, this is more like bilateral or biological intelligence, right? Silicon AI. So, really, put it simply, we're redefining what humans are, right? In a context of the emergence of robotic beings or sovereign robotic beings, which I built in my product, right? Yeah, just to give you a hint, we're building up the MaicroBanker. Really, the brain part is what we build, and the compliance, legal, the ethics alignment is more Western, right? Taking Canada, looking at South Europe and looking to US and Europe, UK, and the rest of the world, right? But the more like hardware, if you will, the components, right? We have a manufacturer plant. It's really more assembly, right? It's like doing cars, right? Within the robotics, mostly imported from China. It's not like we erase their operating system, but as long as not in conflict with the compliance or legal requirement, that's fine, right? But if it is, we'll do our customization, make sure it is totally safe. Building that level of regulation, safety and security, right? Trust. Right? Majorly, you're building the brain, right? But again, this thinking about it. When I say bilateral, right? Two directions. We redefine what humans are, right? Or life, right? In a way, right? They expand, right? Like interlink, Neuralink, right? You insert chips into the brain, but less invasive part. Sinful, I think that's the Bill Gates. I forgot the exact name. You can look it up, right? But eventually, you want to really augment the human capacity, right? Especially the intelligence part, the brain part. But you're going to see the heart, the liver, and then every part of the organ, right? Is up to augmentation and integration part. On the other side, you see China. I mentioned one of the examples. They're building the AI, kind of physical AI, on top of actual brain stem cells, biologically, right? There's different architecture, right? The pros and cons, but they all have market. They all have value there, right? Think about it. If you could also augment what we say sovereign robotic beings using the human, not only in the intelligent tissue stem cell, right? Some other. Essentially, it's kind of redefine what humans are, especially the workforce we mentioned, right? It's going to be the human beings and the robotic beings, right? Robotic beings will be sovereign robotic beings. Humans are kind of still accountable, right? Or responsible, right? Eventually, we are the true leader, if you will, maybe a fleet, but again, humans are the accountable for all the actions, right? So becoming a leader is essential, right? Navigating the regulatory compliance, minefield, cross regions, right? Cross cultural boundaries, and also the emergence of integration of the humans and the robotic beings, right? It's fascinating. It's also very risky, right? You need absolutely innovative technology, right? But it's not enough, right? We need a lot of thinkers, right? We need ethical business practice as well. Business is instrumental. That's the next what we call look at it here. If you look at it, this ontology, right? Business needs to have heart and soul, right? The digital twin is not enough. That's why I'm going to dive there to define what the business ontology is, right? Really, that's quite a substantial effort I have been investing in. Like enterprise AI, that's the key. Just the large language model, just AI model, what capacity is not enough, right? The business has its own like operating system, right? You might use AI to redefine that, but essentially, if you do not have heart and soul, like sort of how the business is running. You don't even know the rules, the policy, the constitution, if you will, how it makes money, how it mitigate the risk, what the cost, what the basic balance sheet, right? How the cash flows, how the workforce you manage, right? The partners, the relationship, right? Applications, no matter technological or non-technological, a lot of nuances. Right? Not it potentially each and every enterprise, if it is sizable or significantly, recognizable, you need to develop your own enterprise, like domain-specific AI models, right? Become part of your operating system. A companion of that is your ontology, right? I would call it ontology rather than an operating system, right? It will, we have to really dive into that. The definitions will change, right? Conceptually, logically, and physically build it up, right? At least the business I built the ontology first, right? How it should, what are the revenue streams, right? How do you manage the cost, right? The product design and building, the workforce, right? And the partnership, and how the cash flows, right? Those have to be designed, right? You cannot just blindly wish this miracle, right? Not gonna be. There's a lot of risks, right? You have to manage. So that's part two, the business part, right? Business where you could expand into like hospitality, right? In the bar that I'm experimenting, and the financial part, obviously the banking, the investment, right? The hospitals, like healthcare, medical science, right? Manufacturing and education, a lot of business models, right? Different assembly plants is different than a refinery, right? Timber industry, and it's going to be see a lot of EV from China coming, right? But again, across the world, there's a lot of new energy plants, data centers, but these are businesses, right? Not only just the banks or factories, right? There are a lot of domains, right? This, collectively we call it the business, right? That's what ontology is for. Now, well, that, when the people move, the talent you need to, sometimes through acquisition of the company, startup, you really just get a couple talents, right? The commodities component, the hardware, so many things you need to integrate together. The AI models, the companies in whatever product. What do you see? They're going to be $1 trillion sort of cash money movement. Right? You need a new financial ecosystem. The current model would not be able to support the futuristic. It's already here. It's already here in part of the world. Just selectively, right? Like the fusion model. If you read the paradigm shift of Professor Kalatas, right? Industrialization, which we're currently in, but driven by AI robotics, it's going to be have some pioneers started from like China and US especially, and it's going to be kind of expanding into peripheral region, not peripheral, because it's like a neighborhood in Canada, right? Which is why it's strategic. Like, sometimes, ironically, whoever started may not be the one that eventually won. If you remember Mark Anderson in I think late 90s, right? The Navigator, the browser, right? Eventually die out, right? Internet Explorer, Google come up, Chrome, nowadays the multiples, right? Firefox is a good one, right? There are others as well, right? And then now the Perplexity, OpenAI, Google, they all hurry building new like Disco. And in China, in 2010, they also have a crazy, a frenzied few years. They were building browsers, right? I don't know, like it's kind of interesting. Now, OpenAI, right, is a pioneer of this AI, large language model, especially the transformer part. It's really, really revolutionary. But again, got into kind of difficulty, right? How do you really recoup enough revenue to cover the cost, right? How do you sustain that? The innovation, right? You may be very good at the, whatever you call it, very savvy, the Silicon Valley sort of politics. But again, it's not enough, is it? The world is quite physical, right? There's a lot of Elon Musk suing OpenAI and Microsoft for a purpose, right? I don't know, it's all that benevolent or not, right? But it's also a business tactic, right, if you will. Now, that's where the worlds we think about if you pay attention to Davos, right, a lot of chats, right, New Finance, right, the BlackRock and JPMorgan and Finance and Coinbase, Europe, China, US, and the Middle East, India, and Canada, of course. So they have a lot of chats there. The New Finance, right, the stable coins, right, the crypto, right, the real world asset tokenization. A lot of opportunities. We are really part of it, right? This one stream our revenue, right? We try to see what we can contribute, not like, well, we want some money. No, I mean, we do. Yes, not like we have to contribute, right? Our innovation, our products, right? Be part of it, right? Because it's a new kind of opportunity. It's $1 trillion market. Let's get a share. We're not intend to monopolize it, right? Probably nobody can, but just try to contribute with our innovation, with our products, the business model, right? So put it in a slightly more meaningful way. Humans are more individual, ontologies, more like businesses, we organize people, right? And where the human beings and robotic beings are going to work together, right? That's where the ontology comes, right? It's not just previously how people they manage, how the cash flow, how the regulatory governance risk is all different now. Now you need ontology, right? That ontology have the human beings and robotic beings in it, right? How they cooperate, work together responsibly and productively, right? The world is like money flows, right? You need to follow the money, right? That cuts down to the basics like silver elements, right? The infrastructure, the money rails, right? How do you really transfer a stable coin? You're not going to go to a SWIFT, are you? I mean, you can. Well, why do you need stable coins if you want to go to the traditional SWIFT? Like, a week later you get the money. No, stable coins and crypto, in a second you get it, right? And fraction of the fees you need to pay for like SWIFT. Right? At the same time, the global South, right? the Chinese part, they have their own strategy, right? They ban Bitcoin, they ban stablecoin, they propose the digital currency, the offshore RMB. They put Hong Kong as the friend to manage that, stablecoins, whatever, RWA and crypto payment, right? They open up the whole province, Hainan province, right? You could do assembly, tax-free zone, right? I don't know if you know that, but it's going to be a lot of companies going to rush there. It's another golden opportunity. Like, whoever doing business should know that, right? If you're not, it doesn't sounds good to me. You might be out of business soon, right? So, three things, right? We talk about Adam Smith, right? The wealth of nation, right? How do you need to redefine what money is, what really wealthy supposed to mean now. Mean you have a lot of paper money, fiat money, or you're rich in stocks, or you have a golden mine in your backyard. Yeah, right? You might have some productivity, right? You own a refinery of silver, right? You can refine rare earth, right? Or you could produce a macro brain, as I'm doing, right? For the robotics, right? Doesn't matter what you do. You have money, AI models, LLM, AI, this capacity, the robotics, but you need a brain to make the what I call solvent robotics to function, right? To work. You need the fleet operating system, right? You plug them into the assembly line, building EVs, building cars, right? Building other robots, or building whatever you want to do, manufacturing or pick vegetables, but you still need a brain. Right? It's really that's the part, that thing is our major innovation or leverage, right? We're going to talk a lot about that. Right? But again, what we're looking for is our contribution. Right? Because it's new, it's nothing really called a standard, or, if it is, we're going to use it, we're going to leverage it. We're not, we rather stand on the shoulders of the giant than recreate the whale, right? But if it's a void, if it's a new opportunity, we'll seize it, right? We'll open that. It's revenue, right? If we contribute and we comfortably earn our share, right? That's fair, isn't it? So how? That is what we do. That's our purpose. We're solving the how problem, if you will. Redefining human, right? Redefining the business ontology, right? The humans in context solving robotics, right? Human beings, a robotic being, the world, what money is, what wealth is, what banking would be, how the capital markets will be, the payment, right? The financial networks, the rails, the cash flow, money flow, right? It's going to be very different, right? We're part of it, right? And so we're redefining a lot, right? And that's. But now we covered a bit of cutting cross. Then the world's part we revealed, right? If you mind. And before we move on to the medical part, the product line called MaicroDoctor, right? Just one of the London product would be macro nurses, right? Macro surgeon, doesn't matter, right? It's really we give a brain, make the humans and the robotic things collaborate, right? So it's a business thing, it's an enterprise. We have to comply with the law, the rules and ethics and the values and so many things, right? And that is our job to make sure. But we have to get the components, right? The nerve systems, right? And the skin's tactile sensors, the eyes, the ears, the fingers, right? The joint, right? It's a lot of work to be done, right? We're not just simply assembling. We give it the heart and soul, give it the brain. We also customize. We have our capacity, right? Capabilities there, but also have show and sell storefront, right? And we have partners, right? We need investors. We need people who are passionate, to do it together. That's why I'm, again, we have to simplify the whole thing, right? It's like a human, right? Our brain using a bit of electricity, but a machine right now, you open the eye, they use how many gigawatts, whatever, to run even a little bit of thinking capacity like my brain could do. Why? Yeah, the humans through millions of years, or thousands of years, no matter how you see life come by. We could be from stars, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm one of the aliens. I don't know. At least our ancestors, whoever originated somewhere else. You never know. Right? And that is where should I say? I mean, I build a little framework. The 6-layer. I show you that. That's intuitive to me, right? Because I've been practicing this for many years, right? And also the fundamental of the Chinese everything, right? Even genetically, right? So that's why it's almost genetically or intuitively to me. I don't even to think I'm practicing it. But of course, a lot of if you talk about the philosophy or dualism, the military, the art, the food, medicine, the politics, right? A lot of things, all the same rule, right? That's why if you look at the elements in the bottom, right, the silver, the rare earth, energy, electricity, right? You all know that OpenAI or whatever AI keeps mentioning OpenAI because that's one of the pioneers. Right? Very respectful, but some other men doing really good. It's not easy and a lot of challenge, but kudos, right? So the second is more infrastructure. I mentioned, the infrastructure, how people move around, how the money move around, how the commodity components, machinery, the import export, timbers, fishes, all kind of stuff, machines, you all need to move around, right? Shipment, right? I used to do the shipment as well, right? And know that intuitively, right? Not intuitively, I'm professionally. Many, like 40 years ago. Again, them three from the bottom up is chip and compute and cloud and dimension. Right? They're all intertwined together, right? Essentially, you need the computing part, chips, right? The memories, the storage, the cloud, the links, right? You see the Jensen Huang everywhere, like at CES in Las Vegas, right? In this Davos, a lot of talks, right? In a Congress, right? Every year they come with a new generation of chips. Right? It's incredible, right? At the same time, the TPUs, LPUs, whatever the acquisition, right? In China, you have Huawei, you have 10 other different chip companies, right? Shanghai, obviously Taiwan is the major fab. But in South Korea you have that, in Japan you build it up, in Europe. But again, it's majorly China and the US part, right? Then no matter where you build it, that's a major con, right? I think in Holland, ASML, I don't know, maybe they're heading in trouble. In a way, right? Yeah, we're not gonna get into the tulip, financial bubble or whatever that's where it is, right? In terms of the finance, we might go visit part of that history, which is important, right? But we cannot cover everything in a day, right? And go up. That's where the models, right? Doesn't matter the multimodal AI model, transformer large language, or now DeepSeek come out model 1, OCR 2. So fantastic. It's true innovator. Like I gave Liang Wenfeng, the CEO, founder of DeepSeek, right? And Huawei, they have a lot of innovation. Minimax, as you can see, they have the moonshot. I'm observing because it is so critical to my business, right? So that's why I'm so keen. It's not like just for fun, right? It's not like crazy for those new terminologies. No, then on top of that, then eventually we come down to the agentic AI, or physical AI, if you will. AI can be in many forms, right? Essentially, we're looking at consumer side or business side. I'm more focused on the business side, because even if you try to have a consumer kind of electronics that AI enabled, it's still a business, right? It's not going to be somebody do that in the backyard, in the basement, and then you occupy the market. No, if you want to do that, business, right? It's our current civilization, one of the silver bullet, one of the best tool that we have. Right? It's not a tribe anymore, right? It's a business. Right? It's not an organizational unit, right? And that is where all those politics and war and belongings, and that's why ontology are built there. Not on the individual human level or family level, right? Or nation level. It's some are too small, some are too large, right? It's not meaningful. And you have to find the business, the right fit. That's where the ontology, right? No, AI, AI, physical AI, you can name a lot. You plug into the medical research, scientific, healthcare, micro nurse and MaicroDoctor. So my line of product, right? Like MaicroBanker or MaicroLawyer, right? Not try to go crazy and do everything, right? You have to be something that to do with what I make sustainable revenue, right? Profit, right? Justify the investment. Right? And if whoever is the investor did, if I promise 100-time return, I have to commit to that, right? I'm not going to say I spend a lot of time to see how do I do a robotics sweeping the floor. I mean, already a lot, right? I don't want to spend too much time. I'm going to get into a finger sort of business for the robotics. Probably not. Right? I'm focusing on what I'm good at, what I think is the most meaningful part. There's a lot of innovators, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of startups. Not too worried. Though, if there's opportunity, somebody is going to fill it up, right? So we have our selectively, right? I think most profitable and most best potential for us, right? Each is different, right? And then eventually, number 6 on the top is sovereign robotics, right? We call it sovereign robotic beings. It's like, that's where you have a bit of ontology there because it's representing the business, right? It's not an individual human being. It's belonging part of something, right? But again, it is like has its independent, self-sufficient, local right, if you remember that, right? But power, the brain is there. It's not a person, but it's a workforce, right? Worker. Right? That's why all the line of products you think about is more targeting the workforce, right? But in order to make a workforce like a human, you need to train it, right? You need to assemble it. There are bodies, there are minds, there are eyes, right? There are nerve system. You have to know the world physically, right? Able to navigate, do the actual work. You have to know the business. You have to know the human, right? You'll be able to see, speak, right? Interact, right? Not easy, right? But it's fascinating to me. That's why I focus on that. That's the business, right? And the line of products would be not go crazy, but again, it's MaicroBanker. It can be a risk manager, can be a frontline teller. It could be somebody just try to broker, facilitate the real world asset tokenization or crypto transaction. It could be just the realistic sort of broker from the bank, just customize a mortgage, right? And make sure the contract is signed, the signature is good, all the documents are verified, right? You submit all that and make sure that inspection is done, right? It's a workforce, right? On the MaicroDoctor line of product, which we're going to come to next, it's quite slightly different, right? We're not trying to get into the surgery now. We see how do we integrate the human being and the robotic beings. That's the angle we from the scientific research, a lot of things have been done, but how do you put it into practice? Right? Can you put into practice? What are the blockers? What are the innovations? What are the challenges? What the opportunity for business? That's what we're looking for. But again, we need to go back to the roots, as I said. Right? What are the roots? I'm going to show you briefly. Right? We need to review the medical history, obviously. Chinese versus Egyptians and Romans and Greek, Indians, right, and the Western, obviously, right, and how it comes by, right, the brain, neurology, right, cardiology, right. I spent a lot of time reading those books, right. It's fascinating, and especially in the context of what I'm doing, the robotic biz, right. Are you put a biological engineered heart into the robotics, the sovereign robotics. Therefore, it make sure that it have the bit of compassion, at least not break the, not hurt the humans, right? Respect the ethics, right? Is that engine, right? Think about an engine. You cannot push everything to the brain, right? Heart. What about the liver part or kidney? Right? Think of how if you have the opportunity, right, to do anatomy, not just to cut the body into parts, right? Figure out how many bones, but think of from the Chinese medical perspective, there are meridian lines, like different functional domains, right? How do you build it into the robotic being, right? It's more practical than build a liver into it, right? Because a nerve system, a sensory system, right? Electricity, right? And make sure that data flows, right, and preserve the encryption part. Think of different functions, right? Because it's business bin, right? It's a sovereign robotics bin, is part of the business, right? It serves people, that's workforce. Think about it, it's slightly different than the individual human being doesn't belong to any business, belong to the family. It's independent, right? It has the physical environment. The robotic beings have different environment, right? You need electricity, right? You need to charge, right? So again, a lot of nuances, details we need to figure out. Right? So, which is why I set up this kind of framework. Then when we talk about anything, it immediately makes sense to me, right? At least to me, right? When I produce the product, I know what I'm doing, I know why I'm doing it, and I know how. How is it, humans and ontology and world, right? That's kind of, playing a word linguistic game, but again, it is the how that drives the revenue, right? That's the purpose as well. Not only the literal meaning, but the literal meaning, yes. Figure out the technology, figure out all those details, figure out the how, it's important. But again, if you look at there are two answers, lift or wall. You have to know that the whole thing is a warfare. Doesn't matter how it's a business, right? It's a lot of competition. The guidelines, the thinking, the philosophy, the tactics, the strategy, right, that you use in war, it is almost 100% applicable, whether you believe it or not, right? It's business, right? The competition happens in multiple levels: product, Product can be money, right? It's all competition, right? But don't just compete if you make an arm, you compete with another arm maker. No, you're competing the whole industry, right? You understand that? Okay. That you have to be thinking that way, but it's more like emotional, impulsive kind of thing, right? It's deleterious in a way, destructive, right? But it's necessary, okay? Not all the time you could do a business, shaking a hand and making a friend. That's not enough, right? You need force, right? Workforce. You need arm, like your tools, right? Capacity. You need manage the risk. You need take the risk, right? That's where the revenue is from, right? You need to mitigate risk. You need to take the risk. If you want 100% safe, there's no business. Okay? You need resources. As I mean, it maybe risk is a better way to look at it because we already covered resource in the 6th layer. We don't have to repeat it, right? But the war thinking and practice is essential in any business, especially in the solving robotic business, right? It's your partner, it's also your enemy. You have to manage it. There are a lot of risks, right? And the other business is your partner, is also your competitor, right? Which is why you have tariff wars, right? It's not that people being silly, but out of national security, there's good reasons behind it, right? They all try to protect their own strategic interests, right? You cannot blame them for maybe they're not, thinking for you, but you should be thinking for you, right? But again, we need to collaborate. We cannot just do the fortress, right? We cannot just, totally fragmented. That's going to be cost everybody more, right? But again, wars are everywhere. It doesn't mean you have to pick up a rifle and shooting somebody. That's not what we're saying. That is like, it's a philosophy, it's a practice. It's one way of, how you look at the world, right? The nature, right? It is at war with nature. Of course, you have to live harmoniously with nature as well. You need to tame the tiger, right? It's how many wars in the history. That's where we need to revisit. But from the angle of the robotic era, the age of AI, right? Guarantee you very soon, right? Doesn't matter how you want to prevent it. There's a lot of risks, right? You look at the modern warfare, it's going to be very robotic. What can you do? We try to have some rules and regulations to make sure that we have ethical standards. But again, you have to admit we are marching towards that, right? Maybe we should come together and go to the deep space, have another battleground, not against each other, right? Like you can deploy sovereign robotic being to Mars, right? It doesn't need oxygen to breathe, right? Maybe better than the biological human being. That's better used than destroy each other, right? But the war thinking, the practice, the strategy part, you need to be absolutely clear. You cannot just say, shaking hands, drinking coffee, then you're done. No, it's not. It's never like that. Okay? You need some sort of strategic mode, right? You need to build a deterrent, right? You have to be aware of those sides, right? But more positive or constructive part is lift. Just imagine this lift in the sky, right? If you, what China is building. Well, history there used to be such a thing, right? We call it 绝地通天. It's where you go to the heaven, right? It's built on a mountain. It's called Heaven Mountain, actually, right? There's a lift, right? All those benevolent beings come down from the lift, and human beings, if you're doing good, you'll be elevated through the lift. to become level 2 civilization, right? Or some sort of god or godness, right? It's just, mystery things, right? But again, that's what we try to put in the human civilization, the human life, the business practice, the financial ecosystem, we are up to the point of being upgraded, right? It's like you're going from elementary school, now you go to junior high or high school or university. You might you need to go to the PhD level, right? You need to go up, and vertically, spatially, right? In space, you need to advance. You need to go up. Now, what is the lift? This is the fast track, right? That's what I mean. So in my mind, law essential, industrialization or reindustrialization, manufacturing, bring back all those, right? That's essential. Financial, I mentioned. Right? You need a new financial ecosystem, and then technological, physical AI, robotics. A lot of technologies, not just AI, robotics. So many. Physics, chemistry, right? So many, right? The material, so many, right? You cannot just say, hey, just AI robotics. They are probably the pearl on the crown, right? But whatever that is, that jewel on the crown, because there are many things, right? Many technologies. Be aware of that, right? The life part, the how, the human beings and ontology suddenly makes sense, right? And the W part. Right? And then you look at the war part, and workforce and army, doesn't matter, the arm is more like the arm, metaphorically, right? The tools, whatever the weapons, right? The arm, something that you could lift up, right? And it could do work. It could needle a fabric, right? You need to pick up an egg. It's all, the parts, right? The body, right? You don't have to be always a whole robot. It could be an arm, right? It could be an eye. It could be a finger. It could be just the agent, right? Soft robots, right? That means robots without the body, or part of the body, right? Doesn't matter. As long as it has a brain, it's good. Okay. So hopefully you get it. How? That's the question. The $3 trillion question, as I mentioned. 2 answers: lift or wall. But actually, you need both. But some majority will pick one. Ironically, we need both. The purpose is clear. The how, the roadmap, the methodology is also very clear. Right? So we talk about this. I think these 6 layers plus this, how, lift, wall, right? 3, 6, right? And next you get into 9, right? It's really the philosophical industrial play, right? Again, we look about this. No, that's not. We already looking at it, right? The actual parent company, the brand name, right? But let's not spend too much time iterating this. Let's move forward. Macro brain, right? That's the major part. We're looking at the different data asset capitalization, right? The kind of strategic part, right? See, let's make it simple, right? But today we're looking at something like we are trending. If you pay a bit of attention, but if I don't know if anybody, maybe very few, follow through so far. But if you have been, I believe you might have benefited already, right? A lot of information put together. We put the big picture and then optimize the opportunity and things, right? And how, why, right? And I'm reading a lot of books, right? Then I'm try to see, we're pivoting to the doctor part, right? Again, we start from the ancient part, Egyptian, right? we need to look at where and how the on the medical side, how the life factors, right? But we try to fit into the sort of framework. I organize my words, right, and thinking as I'm speaking. So let me see. Just get a sip of water. Okay, we'll get into the MaicroDoctor, right? Macrobotics line of products called MaicroDoctor, right? Medicine, right? Healthcare, right? Micronurse. Right? So we need to understand the medicine, right? The medical science side, right? How we come to today, modern medicine. Right? The major research is the China part have probably the most historical records, right? In terms of archaeologically evidence-grounded things. But then we look at the Western part, Western including like everything outside of China, right? Egyptians, Greeks, Indians, doesn't matter. It's all Western, right? So that's a broad stroke kind of categorization, right? Then historically, if you look at it, right, it's a lot of leaps and bounds, advancement, right? Errors, arrogance, right? And so made a lot of mistakes, right? So we have a lot of, for the Western body is not an object to be studied. Well, it's unfortunate, but it's also fortunate. There are part of the history. We believe in something, right? Maybe good for part of the society, but bad for the other. It's always like that. Even right now, AI, robotics, do we not see the danger, the risk? And we do, right? But how do we position that, right? But there are a lot of other effects we don't see yet. Right? We're not right now. Everybody focuses on the positive value-added part, but kind of ignore the not so obvious, the risks, right? The side effects, right? And the anatomy, right? We are going to spend a lot of time the brain anatomy, the nerve systems, neurology, because we're doing the macro brain, macro heart, right? The nerve system, the meridian system in the Chinese medicine is going to be a central studying part. The forensics, right? Because related to law, right? Think about it. We try to pollinate from domain to domain, integrate, emerge, right? Convergence, because that stimulates sort of innovation, right? We have to look at things positive, not get into any of these, pessimistic, conspiracy kind of thing. I don't like that. Right? Protagonist, right? The revolution, right? We all, probably, hopefully, you're familiar with that, right? From the structure to function, right? And this cursory overview we're going to dive into later on, right? The four-headed monster, right? What does it mean? The pen, obviously ignorance, infection, and I don't even know how to pronounce it. Roach, the constant threat of bleeding to death. Wow, that's not nice, right? But we've been through that, right? For millennia, surgery is the desperate, agonizing last resort formed by, surgeons, right? We're not trying to make a microsurgeon yet, but again, some of the small, manageable, justified kind of medical services, like in terms of the MaicroDoctor, where, I propose it because that's where I see integration of the Western medicine and Chinese medicine. Right? People tend to overlook that Chinese medicine part, right? Maybe because, compared to the Western medicine, that's so obvious, right? But the functional part, right? The way it actually catered towards the human, that needs to be revalued, like revalued, what money is, what medical medicine is. We need to rethink, in my opinion, right? How do you administer a medicine? Now you can use a robot, right? Directly into your heart, your cells, right? That changes, right? Changes how to do the medical research, discover new cures, right? New medicines, right? And, like immunization part, we already experimented a lot of stuff, right? But again, you look at how we combine, right? The pain, right? Chronic pain is still a big problem, right? And the double-edged or the sword, right? Women's head, whatever that is. I don't want a lot of demeaning, wrong, right, things. The turning point is Queen Victoria demanded birth of the prince in 1853, right? The endorsement that blessed, right? Legitimately admitted that, right? Any case, so you look at the many debates happen, right? One of the question is, what makes living matter different from the dead matter? That's a good question, right? Well, if you put into the context of our the human beings versus robotic beings, we think we know all the differences. But what if they emerge to be something more integrated, right? Augmented human beings or more biologically engineered robotic beings? What do we see? Right? And the biological automation kind of interesting, right? We need to dive into it, but not getting lost there, right? We need a lot of anatomy, mathematics stuff, right? But we're not trying to become a scientist, right? Remember, it's a business proposition, not a scientific study, right? A chemical break, right? Then it's a chance of necessity. DNA comes by, right? 1944. And the paradox, we explain the medicine, but in doing so, we feel the loss of the soul. Yeah, that's interesting, right? Talking about loss of the soul, we're coming to the age of AI and robotics. We are creating sovereign robotic beings. Does it have a soul? Interesting, right? And the modern synthesis, right? The map, the access, the explanation, we have conquered the body. Really? I don't know. And, the medicine is moved from the temple to the laboratory, from the cell to the molecule, right? But the central mystery remains, we are biological machines. Okay. Biological machines versus robotic beings. Right? Well, very interesting twist, right? Meaning, right? Meaning. Well, that's why we define the why first, then how. We know what we're doing, right? The vital spark may be gone from our textbooks, but it remains in our experience, hopefully. We'll probably dive more into the histories and how we come by, the debate between the soul and body and robotic beings versus human beings, right? But I want to make it clear, not a scientific lecture, right? Not a doctorate degree course, right? No, what we have business proposal, right? We research on the products and the market, the actual meaning of that. I explain the why and the how and what. We know what we're doing. Have a meaning, have a purpose. It's legitimate. It is profit driven, right? Again, I mentioned the meaningful part, right? It will have to be meaningful. We have to be really significantly have good potential of market value. The revenue has to be there, you know. The short history of medicine. Yeah, history is not a timeline; it is interpretation. Right or wrong, I'm not too. The hero, the villains, whatever you believe today, you may one day have to unlearn. True, right? We're in that point, right? A lot of things is like we might have to redefine. That's why we might have to redefine what humans are, what money is, what world is supposed to mean, what is a business like. You need new business models, right? Ontology, right? Workforces, law, right? And industry. What do you mean by that? And financial, a lot of technological, and workforce. I mentioned, right? The arm, right? Or whatever, that art doesn't matter, right? And architecture doesn't matter. You can play a lot of games there, and risk especially, right? And the dead and the Galenic era. We look at the liver in this way, right? This Egyptian. It's fascinating, right? You need to look into that. That's the Renaissance invention of the visual body. It's not an invention, really. If you dive deeper, it's not an invention. I don't want to go too far there. It's more like a copy. The dark side of the knowledge, right? Wow. The Dimon, the Snatcher's Anatomy Act, right? And the visible human, and we got into the great debate. What is life? What is life? Do we say the AI has a life, or some robotic beings have a life? It could live longer than humans, as long as it has energy, right? Could be more smart, intelligent, strong, and live longer, right? What is life? Does it have a life? Do the sovereign robotic beings have life? What life means? We have to rethink that, right? I don't know what is the translation. It's not yellow bow. I don't know. The black, whatever that is, right? It's very interesting terminology. The body is a machine. Not really. And measuring the invisible. Wow. There's a lot of thinking, right? Now we need a new generation of thinkers, right? Bernard, we must know, not just observe nature, we must control it. It's one line of thought, right? The method, the philosophy, they separate from autonomy. It is no longer about the dead structure, but living process. Okay, the milieu, right? Homeostasis. We're independent of the external world. We have maintained a stable internal climate. Ethical cost. The rise of anti-that movement, Bernard's own family protested is torture in animals, right? Oh, yeah, obviously, right? I don't know how guys are going to survive today. There are many animal-friendly protection groups, right? For good reason, right? The molecule turned the victory of the mechanism, vitalism, the chemistry, the hormones, the neuroscience today, right? It's incredible, right? the invention of diseases, illness versus diseases. What is illness? What the patient feels, subjective. What disease is the doctor diagnosis? Oh, the function of the pathology is explained. The diagnosis and predict, justify, and confirm the toxic. Right? We try to emphasize on frenzy kind of thing because that relates to law. Right? The more you have some evidence, it's not just subjective or or objective. It has another layer. It's more like have the blessing, the governmental power, the law, the regulated part, right, is very rigorous, right? That's why we pick it, right? And that is where probably if there are some AI and robotic product innovation there, it'd be most applicable. That's the market, right? Not just the typical civilian side, because a lot of risks, regulations, you might get into trouble. But coming to the forensic, you have a burning need. You have to get to the truth, right? Because there could be a criminal investigation. It's sanctioned by a lot of investigation at the national security level, right? The terrorist, whatever, right? You need a lot of tracing the terrorist finance, right? And money laundering, using biological means, using sovereign robotics. It's a necessity, the burning need. This is why we pick that, right? The germ theory, the age of the invader. Fantastic, right? The germ, right? We look at the other side, criminal, right? The return of the internal cause, right? The different scientists or doctors, right? The pendulum swings back from one germ, one disease to one gene, one ism. My God, very interesting, right? Anatomy, physiology, medicine, pathology, right? It's an ongoing struggle. Unlikely gonna finish soon, right? The open question we have moved from the secret to the structural, from the mechanical to the genetic, but the journey is over. Medicine is an art, and use its science, but it is never finished. History functions as a master, reminding us that what we believe in today, we may one day have to unlearn, right? Interesting, right? That's why reading makes you more at least you're healthier, right? Because you have a lot of fun, right? Even yourself, like me, you still have a lot of fun, right? So because really you're having a dialogue with the author, right? And the author representing collectively many of the scientists, brilliant brains, right? They all have life experience, not just the scientific study, right? Look at it, right? Open question. Whatever you learn today, or believe today, you may have to unlearn today, one day, right? True. I think I mentioned we're going to start diving into the Egyptian part, right? Because supposedly it's the most ancient part, right? Look at it, the eternal legacy, right? The foundation of the pharaoh, right? The Nile River Valley, agricultural. Make it possible, right? You must be able to support the population if you want to have a civilization. If you claim you have that, you must have physical, right? I mentioned that physical AI. The physical is one defining factor. You cannot just blown out there, right? It has to be ecologically proven as well, right? So still some, we can keep our thoughts, but let's read whatever has been produced, right? And let me show you another. This is another view, right? You see now eventually the desert, right? The life flood of the desert, the Nile River, and the pyramids, right? Make it bigger. The peak of the imperial expansion. The reconstruction, the Middle Kingdom, right? The eternal monuments, right? The pyramids, right? Region and crown symbol. Yeah, it's a lot of things. So we're focusing on medicine. I will not try to survey everything. Right? Back to medicine, right? From the birth, right, to the medical miracle of the 21st century. Right? We've been through a lot. The wars, as I mentioned, right, the young science. And the modern medicine, right, is a young science. Ancient Rome, right, the regression and knowledge lost. Interesting, right? But, luckily, they regained, right? And the birth, the garden, the origin system, the epidemiology, art of disease detection. Okay. The clue, the vector, exploding the mouse population, and the transmission. The mouse is our friend, right? Very friendly, but we cut them in parts. Right? What an irony, right? The transmission, but it's for a good cause, right? The consequences. The breakthrough, right? The CDC scientists combine modern lab work and some medicine, the historical knowledge to reach good results for the Hall of Fame victories, right? Smallpox, right? Polio, influenza. So, if you remember, the WHO in the COVID-19 era played a pivotal role, right? The human beings knows how to organize themselves way better than hard lessons, failures in ethics, the moral. Yeah, I mean, the swine flu, you mentioned 2003, and then 2019, right? The umbrella of safety, right? Yeah, these are all respectable, but now comes the advancement of AI and robotics. What is the impact? The real world impact, right? Heart, cardiology, the end of life, right? I think maybe become one line of the product, right? Not the whole heart, but some part of it, right? Because it has meanings, right? We need to combine the Western medicine and Chinese medicine. In Chinese medicine, heart has a special place, right? That's where the soul and heart, right? We say that soul and heart and soul. Right? And the transplant. Again, it is interesting how AI and robotics play a role here, right? You put biological stem cell in a robot. And what about you put a biological synthetical liver, right? Is that possible? Or some part of it? Or maybe do some surgery, in the heart, in the liver, to sustain that without a transplant. Right? Those are medical, opportunities and researching topics, right? Okay, the quality of life. This is where AI and robotic, companions. I try to show you, right? A lot of products in the line, companions at home, pets, right? Again, mental health, right? Thinking about the new community or new home, a new workplace, right? You have robotic beings versus human beings, right? They're friends, they're partners, right? But they're also enemy, right? You have to be aware of that, and you have to be able to manage that risk. The power of prevention, yeah, I believe that. Smoking and the horizon, right? The nanotechnology, the gene therapy, and the cyber medicine. Cyber medicine. What about AI robotic medicine? Maybe that's what it means, right? The ethics warning, and standing in the shoulders of the giants, right? It's incredible, right? Okay. Okay, we talked about human side, the medical. Talk a bit of finance, then we close the chat for today. Kind of late now, over an hour. Right? Again, in the beginning, we take advantage of not many people come to the channel, right? We'll give you some substantive contents and really condensed, right? And if you were having a business mind, you might be able to lift some of the thoughts and open your own business, do your own product, right? That's another kind of compensation, right? It's invitation for you to, be a partner as well, right? The third revolution of time, right? And this is talking about the finance side, the how, the wealth, right? Industry paradigm, right? And quantum kind of thing, right? And then the collision of two enterprises, right? And there's different way of looking at it. Entropy value, information explosion, right? We're drowning in data. In traditional industrial institutions cannot handle the exponential spike, right? And resulting in the global trust deficit, right? If you think about it, the reason I built such a bar, right? I call it MaicroBankers, right? Today when we call customer service, doesn't matter what business, you get a voice. Sometimes it's a voice agent. Sometimes it's a robotic kind of response. Now is more frequently the case, right? Or some ineligible English-speaking kind of services, you spend, that's like after you spend 20 minutes waiting. They keep playing on the nice commercial for you, right? Keep selling products or whatever, right? And keep reminding you being recorded for training purpose. Then eventually, what do you get? Okay, doesn't matter online, doesn't matter, it's over the phone. Even you go to the branch in person, it's very hard to see a real human banker or financier talking with you. The bar, the macro business bar, Macrobotics business bar is like, we use AI, we use robotics, but we have humans there. That is where you have human experience. Really, it's a third place it's a broker channel, if you will. You have a human experience. The humans who lead over the robotic beings, the microbankers, whatever, the AI agent. But you have a human experience. Majority of the kind of financial whatever, resolve your problem, sort out the mortgage or payment, whatever you call it. It's very procedural, can be done very quickly. But the communication, the handshake, the human eye-to-eye contact, you cannot replace it with a machine or voice. Right? That's what people is going to get. Really, the experience is really, we have to get it back. I'm doing my part. Right? Have a coffee, shake hands, have a chat. The business is easy, right? The money is real. The humans has to be, have some compassion there. That is where you build trust. You have to know that it's a human who's going to be accountable, not just nobody. Right? I don't know who you're talking with, right? Sometimes a lot of fraud, right? How do you make, those kind of risks you have to manage. But if you can shake a hand with the real human, right? You can double check through whatever AI robotics. You can, a lot of security, trust concerns are resolved, right? I see this has tremendous value when huge. That's what I'm doing it. Right? I spent so much time and money, build products and learn what is this? The blockchain, the neg entropy or anti-entropy machine. I don't know. These are very theoretical. Right? It looks like a Chinese writing. The bridge between the parallel world and atomic world, physical, the digital world, the blockchain, the value realization, asset tokenization, digital twin. Looks been a few years, kind of. Oh yeah, it's the Chinese blockchain, right? Ledger, smart contract, geometry, love trust, the mathematical foundation, discrete, quantized structure, blockchain network. Have some topology there. The universe now is continuous, but as a network, discrete interactions. Blockchain mimic this fundamental structure. Replace. You don't have to go that far in the cryptology, right? And the paradigm resolution. Yeah, they're good at quoting style, but what is the real message? The evolution of money. Okay, from gold to upgrade. That's what I'm looking for. Fiat money. From the exchange, commodity bartering, right, to the atomic money, like gold, silver, shells, whatever you name it, metal, physics-based scarcity, fiat money, like paper, digital currency. Money is becoming smart. It is no longer just the medium of exchange, but a carrier of complex logic and contract. The digital economy, data as capital. Yeah, that's good. Data, blockchain, asset. Land, labor, capital, and data. The new resource, computing power. The problem and the resolution, position blockchain as a resolution. Yeah, you might heard it yesterday or today, right? The BlackRock and JPMorgan, some other institutions move on to. They're very kind of shifting towards embracing rather than rejecting and demeaning about blockchain, right? For a good reason. Well, we're looking at quantum computing. It's going to be another challenge, right? The collision of the future and the present, quantum computing and blockchain technology forces evolution called quantum blockchain. Okay. The time-space cooperative, a new social contract. The banking tokenizing human time on blockchain, immutable record, and cross-space exchange. Wow, quantum, right? The Wright brothers moment, the blockchain differentiation, right? The concentric circle, the split cluster. We are at the 0 to 1 stage. Okay. What is this? The brain, AI, and the algorithm process, DNA, the blockchain, the verification, the trust, the nervous system. Yeah, this text is a little aged, okay, I believe. But it's a cursory review. We don't have to bundle ourselves in. Just open the topic, right? It's going on. There are blockchain. There are a lot of, and a silver squeeze. You might watch the news, right? For a good reason, right? It's another Chinese book, right? That we're reading. I'm reading another one, like Morgan House of Morgan and Broken Money. It's good reviews, right? But you have to debate what are relevant to what I'm doing, right? What the product, the purpose, the business, the how, the layers, all this kind of thing, right? Unlocking the logic of China's. Well, let's take a cursory review. It's all very basic stuff, right? But what we need to look at is the offshore feedback loop, right? Can that mean be outflow or inner flow? Hong Kong is strategic in a way, and this is the funnel, right? The structural filter. Why money isn't neutral, right? rebuttal to neutrality. In a perfect market, money flows to the most efficient sector. In China, structural kind of distort the flow, soft budget constraint, right? The SOE, state-owned enterprise, right? And the consequence, some bad money drive out good money, right? But that's a useful money. You have to think about it, right? Not because good and bad. You attach a lot of emotion there. It's a good reason, right? And the private equity is very small. That's why AI and robotics. That's why miners run away, right? It's something they have to fix, in my opinion, right? And M2 and DDP. I think we explained what M2 is, not the certificate saving stock and kind of stuff, right? They have a very different financing structure. We'll take a look at the Ant Finance, remember, started by Alibaba. That's an interesting venture, but they made strategic mistakes. That's why being winding down, right? The missing money and the asset price disconnect. That's what I like, right? See, you look at it, excessive kind of liquidity, overcapacity, the global competition, right? The tradable sector, manufacturing, and the stable CPI, deflationary pressure. And then on the bottom, you look at the diagram. If you're listening only, you need to look at, I'm describing from left to the right, from bottom, and then come down to from the top to the bottom part. On the top, the tradable sector, manufacturing. On the bottom, it's non-tradable sector, like real estate. You kind of move on, right? And then the scarcity, the high demand, right? Asset bubble, inflationary pressure, right? You pump a lot of money, investment there, like stock market, real estate market. And that become a problem, right? The missing money, the split, excessive liquidity did not vanish. It flows into asset market, right? The mechanism, manufacturing create goods surpassing the CPI, but credit flows into land and housing, boosting asset pricing. Okay? That is why a safe landing, they spend about, I think, 5-7 years. You heard of the Japan has real estate bubble, but why don't you hear that in China? They manage it pretty well, right? They actually crush it without hard landing. They changed, they pivot, right? That's where the money played a role. The same strategy goes like you only have internal flow, external flow, offshore Chinese, as RMB, right? We see a structural inflation. But in any case, and we'll not dive too much. It's a new sensibility, right? What is this? The policy dilemma from quality to price, and the limits of money policy, efficiency, monetary supplies, stimulus, right? It's all good theory, but in the reality, it doesn't work, right? Look at Federal Reserve Bank, Federal Reserve, right? It plays with theory, right? It still has the power, but diminishing, right, in a way. So yeah, that's where looking at money is as a veil, but a veil that affects the real economy. True, right? So yeah, it's not a fantastic book, but we're looking at the ascent of money, a financial history of the world, right? It's another view. Again, it's not try to. It's really put together some sort of thought to see how it fit into our product and business model, right? And the dematerialization of value, the labor, right? Labor used to be underpinning value, money. But today, if we say the workforce or majorly or halfly become robotic beings, that underpinning is gone. That's how it relates to what we're doing, thinking about it, right? Money is not real. Money is not metal. Money is not paper. Money is not labor anymore, right? There used to be a system of trust. Now, of credit. But now, what? What is it? What is the system of what? Labor? Trust? What is it? It's going to be transforming. We need to redefine that. Now the contractual link, the imaginary system, the faith, right? In God we trust, well, in silver we trust, whatever, the mouths of hell, right? The Spanish Empire is a blessing or it's a curse, right? That's a lesson to be learned, right? The silver, we look at the silver historically in China, right? It's related to the Spanish as well in the US, right? That's significant. It's also tightly related to what we do. The 6 layers, the elements part, the currency, robotics, they need that for electricity, conduction. The human moves. Oh my God, this is today. If you look at the silver in Peru, right, in South America, they're on strike, right? The limits of the metal. The another squeeze part, the bottleneck, circulation, supply, refinement, right? And the loan sharks, right? The mathematics of desperation. It's all part of the history, the credibility of the promise, right? I promise to pay. Yeah, that's good, right? That we trust. And the Federal Reserve. See, when an American accepts the dollar, he's definitely trusting the Federal Reserve, and not to repeat the mistakes of the Spanish conquistadors. But where we are now, do we still trust that? We no longer trade goods as silver, we trade labor. Again, for fiat currency backed only by authority. See, authority. Who has the authority? Who has the sovereignty? The power struggle, right? If we see labor is underpinning, again, the robotic being is part of the major workforce, part of it, then how do we price it? It's a question, isn't it? It's also a business question. Invisible. By the way, that's why it's one way to really reduce that cost, right? But, reduce is not the best way, but, we need to resolve and redefine that value system, right? From matter to mind. Glasgow, modern era. We need to think through. There's a fascinating historical perspective. Money is a mirror that reflects our greed and fear, our persistence and our dreams. Money is no longer an object. It is the collective imagination of human race and quantified. Okay, we'll look at the ascent of money, we'll look at the virtual credits and historical part of it, right? So, very good, right? Thinking through this have business implications, You cannot just keep saying that you're creating something out of the thin air, a vacuum. You just had a dream and you know everything. That's not true. We'll close shortly, right? It's kind of late. What time is it? Okay, the fate of the world currency. Circle of rise, fall, and hegemony. That's the word. And I think Prime Minister Carney mentioned hegemony, right? You cannot monetize that relationship, the partnership for too much, right? You cannot always milk the cow too much, right? History is not a linear progression, but a recurring circle, right? And the global reserve currency is the ultimate price of sovereignty. Sovereignty. Okay, the dynamic circle, and the rise, and the peak, and the decay, and the transfer. Where are we now? Are we in a decay or transfer? Here, what is the harvest of money? Harvest of money. Money, money, money. Louis, what is it? Louis 7? Is it 7 or 12? I don't know. 12 maybe. On the three things needed to win a war: money, money, money. My God, the zero-sum game, right? The European. We cannot play that game for too long, right? Can we? And the British ascent, right? 1694, then 1949, the war starts, right? The sovereign standard, building the sovereign standard, right? Sovereign, right? Think about it. The good reserve, the foreign investment, the billions of overseas investment, right? In 1993, British controls nearly 50% of the global foreign investment, right? The Navy protects the trade accumulates the gold. And U.S. repeated after that, about another 80 years or so, 100 years or so. Oh, slightly after that, after 1945, I believe, right? Then transferred to New York, right? 1994, London, the debitor, the creditor. Right? Then eventually, right, in debt. Right? Right now, the U.S. is similar situation, right? The fatal error, the Churchill good parity, right? 1925. In the decision in 1925, right, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Britain in that time, right, forces the pound back to the gold standard. Why? Need to think about it, right? It's not just for fun. Have good reasons underpinning, right? Now we try to see, hey, real world asset tokenization. Think again. If you bury the silver and gold BlackRock yard, what are you really doing? As a nation, as a, the banking system, do you really want to go back to the gold? Or can you? A physical asset? The mistake, this is not the economic damage of the war, and the pound was overvalued. Right now, is the dollar overvalued? The fiat money? I think the answer is obvious, right? Making the British steel and coal too expensive for the world. The warning, the John Keynes and Keynes, right? The economic consequence of Mr. Churchill, forcing the pound back to the gold is that it's shackling a debitor nation to a higher good price would be suffocation. I think he's right, And then, what happened after that, the American century begins, right? You may play a smart move, a finger, but it come back and bite you, right? So now we all know the Bretton Woods, the dollar, the golden dollar, the golden bricks, the yellow brick road, right? Dorothy dancing with the straw man and tin man and the lion, right? A lot of those stuff. That's the major entertainment part for my children when they're young, right? And the Marshall Plan exporting liquidity. Wow. Strategic goal. Europe faced a dollar shortage. They need goods, but you see, we need money to keep things afloat. Right? The liquidity, right? 3 billion, 1948 to 1942. Rebuild Europe. The catch, the aid money was recycled to purchase U.S. industry goods, embedding the dollar as the base currency of the European Union. We are embarking on a program of generous aid, but the United States should not be unmindful of its own interests. See, what is the catch? And the Nixon check, 1971, the fiat weapon. See, that's what we need to review the trick. Massive deficit from the Vietnam War and the Great Society program. France began to demanding the physical gold, shifting back, right, for their dollar. And the shift, Nixon suspended the convertibility. The gold became a pure fiat currency, backed only by the U.S. military power and confidence. The petrodollar, the anchor shifted from gold to oil. It is our currency, but it's a problem, right? When in the Obama era, they tried to invent the, credit, some sort of carbon credit. It didn't really go that far, right? And they pulled it off, I guess, right? But we are now looking for RWE, stablecoins. What is it? Oil, gold, real world assets? That's the question, right? And the challenger, the rise of Japan. Okay, Japan, the Plaza Accord. We all know that 1985, the bubble burst 2000, right? Been through that. Then 97, right? The Korean, the Thai, the Indonesian, right? One interesting part, the Soros effect, speculative. Right? You know who George Soros is, right? And the circle continues. Right? The hard money industry, the builder, right? And the euro, and the crisis, the devaluation, the transfer. And then the current status, the US is now the world's largest distributor, mirroring the position of the UK in 1945. The closing thoughts, the hegemony is not permanent. It is won by industry, money maintained by force, and lost to hybrids, right? The dead months and rebels rise, the dynastic circle turns more, right? A Germany institution, the ruler, right? The fiat versus stat, the spender. Right? Yeah, it's a good thing. We need to think about the circle continues, right? So what is the next turnaround? That's a question. Think about it. Okay, let's look at another interesting thought process, right? Another perspective, if you will, right? And let's go from the beginning. Right? This is from the fate of the world currency. It relates to our, the W part, right? The world, right? The financial ecosystem, right? The money, right? What money is and what worlds could be, and the MaicroBanker, right? The deeper underpinning of that, right? The fate of world currency, the cycle of rise, fall, and hegemony. History is not a linear progression, but a recurring circle. The global reserve currency is the ultimate price of sovereignty. But stablecoins and sovereignty, are they playing well? Thinking of now, right? We're reviewing how we come to today. Right? The dynastic circle, the rise, the industry and gold, the peak, the war and hybrids, and the decay, the death and delusion, and the transfer crisis. Where are we? Are we in a transfer? We need to redefine, not only transfer, in my opinion, right? And money. I think is Louis 12, whatever, right? What is needed in a war? Money, money, money. What a zero-sum game, right? Up to 1914, right? The European powers were the world's the credit, right? And by 1918, they were the debitor, right? The worlds did not disappear; it migrated across the Atlantic to America, right? There are lessons to be learned, right? Like we reviewed the Silver Empire, right? How silver came from, right? The Spanish, the conquest of South America. We know that the mules, right? We call it like that. The worker falls in the mine, right? And the British ascent, right, from 1694 to 1914, right? 1694, I put the Bank of England on our MaicroBanker 100, the chart, right, for a reason, right? Establishment of Bank of England. Why? War, right, against France. There's also some revolution or reform of some other part, right? Newton, 1717, fixes the gold price at £3, right? Yeah, standard holds over for 200 years. Think about it, right? Britain controls nearly 50% of the global foreign investment. The Navy protects the trade, and the trade accumulates the gold. And then you look at it, the US did the same for the next century or 8 years since 1945, right? Yeah, here it is by the transfer, the gold reserve, right? The debt, right? The UK national debt climbed to how many billions, right? 1914. That billion is like trillion today, right? The mechanism, Britain depleted the treasury to pay JPMorgan for arms, and the US stayed on the initially accumulating worlds, joining only to secure investment. Then, from London to New York, and the US dollar replaced the pound as the only currency with the sovereignty to back the global system. The world, if you remember the framework, right? It is a war. Not only the vitality and the battleground in the rifles, right? The tank or fighter jet. Financial is also a warfare, right? How the transfer happened? You think peacefully, willingly, because their friends afford to give the billions to the US? No. A lot of fights, a lot of warfare, kind of strategy, battles being fought, right? The feudal era, Churchill, the good parity. Right? The decision, Winston Churchill forces the pound back to the gold standard, that the pre-war parity, about £5, it's a mistake, right? Why? Because you ignore the economic basics. Right? The pound was overvalued, right? It's like a US dollar right now. Is it overvalued? Okay, but you keep. What are you gonna do, right? It's gonna be, if you follow the cycle, it's gonna be a transfer, right? Willingly? No, nobody's willing to give their money away, right? And can raw the economic consequence of Mr. Churchill's action, right? Pushing back the gold to back up the pound, right? It's going to be shackling a debtor, whatever the nation in debt, to high good price would lead to suffocation. Underpinning. What is the underpinning, right? You can't force it, but what is the real underpinning, right? All right, now the American century begins, right? The rest is history, we know, right? And the good reserve, United States, 1945 is 25 billion USD, right? The world trade, the global industrial output is 6%, right? And the competitor being destroyed, right? Japan and Europe wins, right? Because of war, right? War is not cheap. It's more like a money intensive. The fighting using money for money, right? But you need industrial power. Bretton Woods, the dollar as the sun, right? Pegged to gold, $35 per ounce, right? The GDP, IMF, the World Bank, the World Bank, the France and Denmark and Japanese yen, all that kind of all packed together, right? The anchor is the US dollar, was the only currency directly convertible to gold. And the orbit, all other currencies were pegged to dollar. Right? And the victory, the US, right, defeated the UK proposal, can tempt it, but that is very easy to say is for their own interest. Of course, the US didn't accept it. Well, we can uncover the story, but I assume many of you, if you're listening to what I'm talking, you know that. I don't have to repeat it. And the Marshall Plan, sparring liquidity, that's fantastic strategy. Right? Rebuilding Euro, rebuilding Japan afterwards, right? The strategic goal, they have the shortage of dollar. As I said, you want reindustrialization, you need money. Keep it flow, right? Because money is something more than just to accumulate wealth. Any industrialization, if you don't have money flows, it is not possible, right? It cannot happen like today. Robotics era, you cannot think the swift wire transfer will suffice, right? It's impossible. Right? You have to think of a new financial ecosystem, new payment, new underpinning of the money itself. The wealth will be valued differently, right, than the past 80 years or 100 years or 1,000 years, right? The execution, the catch. We're embarking on a program of generous aid, but the United States should not be unmindful of its own interests. You see, that's the brilliant recap, right? The Nixon shot, right? The Fiat weapon, 1971, right? In August 15th, right? 1971. So they cut the peg, right? Dollar to gold. Instead, triggers massive deficit from the Vietnam War and Great Society program, right? France began demanding the physical gold for their dollar. The shift, Nixon suspended the convertibility. The dollar no longer convertible to gold. The dollar became a pure fiat currency backed by only by the U.S. military power and confidence, credit, right? Sovereignty, power, right? The petrodollar anchor shifted from gold to oil. Middle East, right, become important. Well, it's our currency, but it's your problem. Interesting, right? And then the Japan rises and the Plaza Accord, then the bubble, the burst, right? You know that the cheap money, eventually, like one of the German philosophers called Nietzsche, right? The balloon, right? This little needle, you could, pop it, right? And the crash in the last decade began in Japan, right? And then the USD, the four tigers being harvested by 1997. because they're packed. Right? The strategy, the miracle, not a miracle. It's a strategic warfare, right? Okay, the Soros speculative attack. Financial market punishes weakness. When the reserves run dry, the currencies collapse. Look at now the silver market, right? And the hedge fund, the quantum fund, right? Assume you know who George Soros is, right? The IMF, right? Then mid-1997, the Bank of Thailand drains the billions reserved to defend the past. Well, who survived? Think again, who survived? Hong Kong. Why? Because China backed it, right? All the others are gone. Why are they gone? Because they don't have a parent, right? How do you even survive, right? It's a warfare, right? Think about it. They have supplies. That's the money, right? And didn't mention that, but again, should know what is happening. I was witnessing all of this, right? Okay, here's the cycle of continuous hard money, hard. What do you mean hard? Real world, gold, silver, real world asset, the builder, right? Then the crisis, and whatever, right? Continues devaluation, the transfer, right? Then it continues, right? The current status is in the position of UK back in 1945, about 80 years later, right? The closing thought, right? The hegemony, right, is not permanent. It is won by industry, maintained by force, and lost to hybrids. It's dead months and rebels rise. The dynastic circle, one will turn once more, right? The fiat and debt, the spender, right? The hegemony and institution. Like Prime Minister Marconi mentioned, hegemony, right? Fortress kind of thing, right? Building. You cannot monetize the relationship, the friend alliance, right? Whatever the partnership, too much, right? Because you're hegemony, right? Yeah, we should close. It's close to 2 hours, right? Let's see if anything we can add. Otherwise, we'll close it. Okay, it's another go back to root, the ontology part, right? We talk about the humans and the worlds. Now we talk a bit about ontology, because we're looking at a $3 trillion kind of question, each of them, right? The ontology part, right? So for solving robotics, we will dive deep, because we will get into the ontology, what really it is, not what you hear from Palantir, right? Maybe they have a different view. The global crossroad, right? Lift versus wall. That's my terminology. It's more ascension, lift, right? Think about it. The lift, law, governance, autonomous agents, industrialization, physical manufacturing, reindustrialization, new industrialized production, manufacturing, then a new way and economy beyond fiat phase, right? Where do we go? Go back to gold? Go back to RWA? Go back to stable coin? Do we know? The technology, right? Engineering for multi-planetary civilization. Well, even you can conquer the desert, right? You rebuild it to have another 8 billion human beings. That's incredible. You don't have to go to Mars, but again, multiplanetary is aspirational. Maybe the moon. The sea is also a territory, right? But redefine humans. It's almost the last frontier. Think about it. Now, ontology, we need to redefine the business. What business is, right? What wealth is. The other side is zero-sum war, risks, right? Destroying, right? workforces and army and arms, whatever. It's a zero-sum game. You always have to have thought. We need both, actually. You need to manage the risk. You need to use thought as well, right? You need to build up the workforce. Doesn't matter, for productivity, for cost cutting. You have to. It's a necessity. Okay, that's why it is business, right? Resources can be weaponized. The financial system can be weaponized, like silver, the rare earths, the production, right? The lot of stuff, right? I think I told the story, the landlord filling the well with stone. Why? Think about this. It's a parable, right? But many people do that. Currently, it's happening, right? The tools are the same. Everybody's capital. The destination depends on the operating system. We talk about, the strategic operating system. How? Human, ontology, and world. Do you know what is this from? This is from I Ching, right? The Chinese medicine part of it. Okay, and okay. Beyond the tools, the crisis, observant, robotic being. The crisis, global labor shortage. People just don't produce children. People just think study is easy, right? They want happy, right? Demographic decline, unwillingness to reproduce, aging population, shrinking workforce. Okay, that's why we produce workforce. MaicroBanker, MaicroDoctor, MaicroLawyer, microsurgeon, This is my brand, right? Trademark, right? They're not simply machine, they are partners. The new workforce to coexist with human beings. And as you can see, the where revolution redefine the human again, the body, the Tesla Optimus, the biological intelligence, the pivot, the limit, the race, silicon skill, and the biological evolution, right? The brain on chips, the life of chain of thought, right? The frozen intelligence, the bottled intelligence. That's why I built the macro brain, right? And the crisis of soulless intelligence. The problem, right? Think about it. How do you reconcile heart? Maybe build another heart, not just brain. From spiritual schizophrenia, fragmentation, hallucination. Yes, go back to the root. Go back to what I call I Ching, right? Go back to ancient times, the basics, right? The fundamentals. Right? When the lower soul dominates, right? The spirit flows outward. Right? The danger is not just the external wall, but internal dissolution without, what is good in flow, right? It's more like internal ontology, right? The system collapses into entropy, right? So, okay, we talked about that. For AI, we'll look at this architectural AI, deeply rooted in I Ching, right? I'll dive deep because I believe most of you will benefit, but you probably don't know, right? You don't have this much time as I do in reading. I don't have the convenience of knowing the other part, right? The data, the processing, the feedback loop, the action, the memory, the context, right? Then the center, the stable intelligence, right? The peripheral agents, right? Again, you have to have the architecture there, right? Is the light, right? The soul, the heart, right? You arrange them. You have to become some servant, the robotic, like some soul, like things, ontology there. So otherwise, you're turning backward. Right? You're gonna get into hallucination, get into some sort of leakage, right? The application you have to create self-sustaining, not hallucinating kind of ontology, right? Operating system, heart and soul, whatever you call it, enterprise AI. That's what it needed. That's what is my product, right? Takes a lot of innovation. It's not just easy, okay? but it's deeply rooted in the whatever has been tested, proven, right? Not just you have an innovation. What innovation? Maybe already been proven false, right? Balancing the goals in this spirit, right? We're not getting too much into it now. You need to synthesize that, right? The end of paper from promised possession, right? Insolvency, right? RWA, the real world asset, good silver energy, industry capacity, commercial real estate, zombie, it's a lot of stuff, right? Moving from face-based currency to possession-based value, is that right? He who owns the bridge between the mind and the physical world will win. Canada has a position, has a shot, but I don't know whether the financial rails for robotics is the golden handle, right? Look at it, digital mind, the physical world, right? The agents, the MaicroBanker, the commodities, energy asset, it's my product, right? You call it my invention, and tokenization, stablecoin, smart contract. Sovereign robotics requires sovereign finance. Robotics don't just need bank branches; they need programmable money, right? They need the infrastructure there, the nerve system there. BlackRock's, and JPMorgan, they're all embracing the decentralized sovereignty, right? Think about it, the risk management. You need to diversify. You need to really take a leap of faith to the future, industrialization 2.0, the physical reality, right? Nerve system and metabolism, data centers, the power grid, the new temples, the manufacturing. That's where you should worship, right? The core strategy picks the shovel for the AI gold rush. You cannot eat code, you must touch the ground, the mines, and the steel, right? And that's my business, the solution architect. 6 layers, how lift versus wall, but you need both the golden body, biological silicon hybrid hardware ontology tag, the domain-specific agent, MaicroBanker, MaicroLawyer, the human workforce, the RWA financial system, the Q line, right? I want you to know this. The business is a survival game. Only those with the soul, ontological center, and the root, physical asset will survive. The divergence, right? My belief, right? That's what I'm building. Okay, so you could see this, right? It's my proposal, right? You must merge ancient wisdom, right, with the future technology. 易经, in terms of the practice part of that, right? Ontological part, right? The sovereign robotics. Engage the world, do not just talk. Build. Action. That's what we call action AI. And physical AI. Robotics create a vessel with a new consciousness. Natural is the way. Okay. Yeah. I think we should call it a day. Thank you.